I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?
Good morning, all. You're listening to Bound for Glory on SYN, SYN's only AFL football show. Before we get to the games, and we've got a big show, we've also got the rumour file we're going to open, some of the trade wins and some of the insider word on the Melbourne coaching situation that we've been digging around on for the past month or so. Before we get into that, I think we should go around the panel. Good morning, all.
I'm Ethan Meldrum.
That's not good morning. I'm Jordan.
I'm Jordan Whitty.
I'm Ashley Craven.
Yeah, good morning, guys. It's a little cold. I can understand your brains aren't.
It took me like 10 minutes to de-ice my car this morning. I parked it at the station and I walked up to get it this morning. And it was just, I couldn't see through the windscreen. I'm chipping away with the towel and it just sucks. It's so cold.
It's that time of year.
My mum told me to pour a bowl of hot water on my iced windscreen this morning. No, I didn't.
Don't
do that.
Like I listened to my dad.
All the mechanics out there listening, hopefully, are just shaking their head going, no. Okay, I think we'll quickly move on from that. On Friday night, Hawthorn, in more controlled conditions, they did the job against West Coast. They conceded 100 points, the first time they've conceded 100 points since Tom Hawkins buried them in that game towards the end of last year on the Siren. What did you guys make of Hawthorn, and what do we take out of the game?
I think the thing that I've taken from it is that, and I heard Hodge talking about this on Before the Game last night, is that Buddy doesn't seem to be the main goal-kicking target. They've put a heavy reliance on Roughhead now, which, if Buddy doesn't stay at Hawthorn next season, that's really good to see, because you know that they won't be, impacted as bad.
Well, that stat last year when Franklin injured his hamstring, that Gunston was kicking 3 goals a game, Roughhead stepped up, and they're getting goals out of Rioli and I suppose players like Smith and Puopolo as well. And so it's good to see that they have all these options that can hit the scoreboard. And I think the last 2 weeks they haven't actually won that much of the ball. They've lost the disposal count in both games and still won. I think they've got a lot of players that can actually impact the game. With limited disposal, and it's going to hold them in good stead for the next few weeks, I suppose.
So if he goes to GWS, will he be the most expensive decoy forward that's ever played the game?
Yes, by a very long way.
Because, how many goals did he kick on 2?
2 goals, sorry.
And we got 5 out of Gunston and 5 out of
Jackie
Roughhead.
Gunston, he's a very good kicker of the football from a set shot.
Reminds me of Aaron Black from North, a sort of medium-sized forward. Not medium-sized forward, but
tallish
third forward type player. He's third behind Franklin and Roughhead, and he's just a very good player. I can see why Hawthorn went so hard after him from Adelaide.
Yeah, it was a very decent acquisition. It's that extra dimension because you've got... Obviously, they've got the tools who will play on Franklin and Roughhead, and then you've got those medium-sized players, and you've got players like Gunston. And obviously, the quick, small players, the agile ones, are going to play on a Rioli, or they'll play on a Smith, or they'll play on a Bruce. But then you've got, your sort of mid-sized defender who's just that bit too short to play on Gunston, and he's very good overhead Gunston. That plays straight to him. And I think Hawthorn, what I took out of the game is that even when they get pressed, and this was the biggest knock on them last year. We saw it in the grand final. We saw it when Geelong did it when they beat them twice last year. They pressed them, they harassed them, they pushed them, and it looked like Hawthorn fell apart, that there were lots of outside players that were downhill skiing, and that was the biggest knock. I think they've started to counter that. A lot of their outside players did really well. They picked up some contested ball, and they're helping... not only using their good skills, but they're also working hard off the ball. And that was another criticism, that they weren't working as hard as they were during the season in the finals.
Well, they're becoming a very resilient team, I suppose, in that aspect. I mean, they lost the disposals by 50, which is it's a pretty large number, and then they still won contested ball. So, they're going well.
I just want to throw a name up for you guys. Probably we could have waited till the trade thing, but Xavier Ellis was sub and he had 5 touches. Is it worth him going to a different football club at this stage?
He's not the best 22. I think he can be elsewhere. So I think it'd be wise for him to see what options are out there.
Does he have any currency at all? Like is he going to be like Will Sierakowski, where another club picks him up for pig 85 or something? Is there anything, or 58? Sorry, my numbers around the wrong way. Is there anything? Is there hope for Xavier Ellis' football career, or is he pretty much done?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like what you saw from Scott Gumbleton. I suppose I think the difference between those two players is that they're both top 3 draft picks, and Gumbleton's got a bit of game time and Ellis hasn't. And I think that lowers his currency a little bit. I think if he does get game time over the next few weeks, maybe a couple of injuries happen, he breaks his way into the side, then he plays well, then his currency goes up, and I think it'd be good for him to move.
I think on Ellis, I think the only sort of club that would pick him up would be a club like a Bulldogs or like a St Kilda that needs top-up experienced players whilst they're in a bit of a tough patch.
And the Dogs especially, they need a bit of outside run. I think they should chase him hard.
Yeah, if it comes up and he wants to move, then that may be it. And I think that has been an issue with a lot of those Hawthorn players. Who is the other one who played in the 2008 grand final, hasn't seen much since? There was another one, Clinton Young.
Yeah,
he was the other one that was looked at for free agency by a couple of clubs, and he obviously went to Collingwood, and he hasn't obviously had the big impact, but I think
he's been injured, so
he's been. Oh, there you go.
Come on now, cut him a little bit of leeway.
I think that's exactly what a Bulldogs or a St Kilda would need at the moment. Obviously, going to Collingwood and being injured, and would you say he's best 22 at Collingwood?
Ellis?
No, Young.
Young would probably be borderline. He probably would be, but probably in the 16 to 22 bracket.
Okay.
So
yeah. I think on West Coast, what are we getting from West Coast? Because West Coast we know West Coast are a better team than this. And do we put that down to injuries? Do we put that down to how they play? Because they played okay on Friday. They weren't as bad as they've been this season.
Well, I think they reminded us, how good they've been over the past couple of years. Players like Andrew Gaff, who he had shields on him for most of the night, and this is the first time he's really broken attack this year. He had 29 disposals. He was quite good. Luke Shuey, and these are young midfielders as well. So it's good. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think it's necessarily that West Coast were that bad. I think Hawthorn is just that good. Like 11 wins on the trot. I mean, they've beaten pretty much everyone there is to beat at this stage, and. Like I'm saying, I don't think that the Eagles are that bad a football team. Like, to be able to put 100 points on the board against the Hawks is no mean feat, and still keep Franklin quiet. But then it's just the Hawks have these players that can pop up elsewhere. They've got the Gunstons and the Roughheads, and they're running midfielders like Savage and Lewis and all that can impact the scoreboard. So I don't think the West Coast are that bad. I don't think West Coast are that bad. I think the Hawks are just that good.
Well, a lot of people had them for premiership favourites, and they're not even sure if they're going to even scrape into that 8. Do you think that they'll play finals?
Well, where are they? The 10th at the moment, I think.
I did my crazy ladder predictor, which ladder predictors mean nothing unless you get all of them right, which we know is impossible. But
not necessarily.
I had them about finishing 8th, just scraping in. There's a game, I believe, in the last round where they play Adelaide, and I reckon that would be for 8th spot.
See, the interesting thing is, though, I reckon West Coast would be a very, very dangerous side. Like, you wouldn't want to be fifth place. Because West Coast can play well in Melbourne, as you saw on Friday night. So you wouldn't want to be the 5th place team playing West Coast because they're a lot better than us.
I think if you run into Essendon or Richmond versus West Coast Etihad, I'd put that at a 50-50 game personally.
Yeah, and we'll be getting that game very soon. Essendon do play the Eagles. I think they play them first over in Perth, but then they've got them on the return, and I think I want to see that's a bit off topic, but Essendon and Richmond are the two that I had in the 6th and 7th, if I recall correctly, and there's still two teams that I don't know how they're going to fare up in finals. I know that they're playing well at the moment, and we'll get on to Richmond later, but also it's the same as West Coast. I'd put them in that group there that we know that they can play well. They can play a sort of top 4 standard when they're at the absolute best, but we just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, we know they've got the home ground advantage, which, they probably haven't utilised as much as they could this year, but we know they've got the experience. They've still got players like Kennedy kicked another 5. He's leading the Coleman. Dean Cox was very good on Friday night, and Nick Natanui, we know how good he is. He's an All-Australian ruckman, of course, and they've got a lot of talent there that's had them top 4, top 5 the last couple of years, and I think if they keep playing the way they played on Friday night, they're going to keep pushing up the ladder.
There's a definite knock on one of those players, Luke Shuey, that in the West there's this thing where he's a bit of a downhill skier. He had 13 touches in the last quarter, and he was one of those players that stepped up and really asserted themselves on the game and said, West Coast, they gave it a fair shake. Hawthorn obviously kept them at arm's length, but he was one of those players that stepped up, and I think if him and some of those other outside players like Gaff and stuff, if they continue to play well while those inside players provide what they provide, like Priddis and Kerr, it's a fantastic midfield when you break it apart and look at it, and it's a midfield that could challenge if all goes right, but if all goes wrong, it goes wrong, doesn't it? I think we've seen that.
In a bit of a heap.
Yeah, the St Kilda game was one they got away with. The Richmond game was a disaster. Richmond just pressured them, and they fell apart. I think just on that, what do we make of Andrew Embley? That
last season.
No.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't say that.
The wrestling move.
I didn't see it, so I can't comment.
Well, whether it's all in all rough conduct, or he gets separate instance for the push in the face and the knee in the chest before that, he's going to get weeks. He's going to get a few weeks for that. So
I'm sorry, Andrew. I don't know if you listen to the show. Hopefully you are. I'm a big fan.
Weird.
Just here's a reminder. I don't know how you would get away with that in a nightclub toilet, let alone a football field. That was the most weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I don't know how you get away with that anywhere.
Why nightclub toilet?
He had to bring it in.
I had a hard upbringing.
What nightclubs in Caroline Springs are you going to? And there's just people brawling in the toilet. Goodness.
I think we should move on that.
Yeah, Kurt Tippett, he played his first game for Sydney, and it was terrible, and they lost, so maybe they shouldn't ever play him again.
He got the first goal in the first 30 seconds, and everyone probably thought, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I think that's the first time all South Australian football supporters have been united in hating Kurt Tippett for 60 seconds.
Didn't Port ask for people to get to the ground to boo him or something?
No, that was Adelaide fans revving themselves up to get down. They ended up showing up.
Well, Tippett's stats, I mean, where's he finished up with? 6 disposals, a goal. Meh. Really meh. Do we put it down to being out for 11 weeks and having no match fitness, or
I'd put it down to conditions personally.
Conditions in the midfield were absolutely
he had
pulverised.
2 of the first 3.
He started well.
Kicked 2 goals,
and then died completely.
Well, when Sydney's midfield performs like it does, Hanbury gets tagged completely out of the game, and they just don't stand up in what are shocking conditions. I mean, both teams going at less than 50% kicking efficiency is ridiculous, and when you got that kind of service, it's very, very tough to get your hands on the footy, let alone score goals. So I think he did okay given the circumstances.
But I think that Port Adelaide got up just throws a whole new spanner in the works. We just thought, Port Adelaide had their run early in the season and they died off a bit, and now are they going to have another run, after the mid-season break, or is this just another one-off?
Well, they've now beaten West Coast and Sydney at home, which are, 2 top 9, top 10 sides. So I think, they're a team that could scare anyone, I think, if they don't take them seriously. I don't think Sydney really did take them as seriously as they could, which is weird for, we know how professional and Sydney are as a club. And I think, it's unusual to see that, and I think if teams don't take Port Adelaide seriously at home, they stand a very good chance of not winning that game. So I think you got to be on your game when you face Port Adelaide at home.
And Sydney, do you reckon they're going to finish in the top 4 now?
Oh yeah.
If Freo win today, they're going to go 4th, and Sydney are going to slide outside to 5th.
Yeah. I don't think Essendon will finish top 4.
I don't think the way on the again back to the ladder predictor, which. Again, I don't place great importance on, but I had Sydney finishing 2nd. I still think that there's still a lot of 50-50 games where they do travel to Cardinia Park to play Geelong, and I had them winning that, but that's a 50-50 game. I think Geelong will be in playing better football towards the end of the season. They still have to play Hawthorn, and I had them beating Hawthorn as well. That's another 50-50 game. this is a game that could ultimately have changed the top four, because if Sydney do drop those games later in the season against the obviously top quality sides, then they can look back and say, well, this game cost us a home final. This game or cost us a top four spot if Essendon keep winning. So
as well as that draw against Freo as well.
Yeah, as well. That's 2 points you lost, and
that's coming from a 24-point lead as well.
Yeah, they were leading by 4 or 5 goals midway through the last quarter, and Sydney, again, and it's not them, and I'm going to keep pointing to it because it keeps happening. They have this sort of little brain fade. They did it twice last year. It was all right. They kept it under control when Collingwood challenged them, and they kept it under control and they wrestled back the control from Hawthorn and won the grand final. Now, that's all right when you can control momentum like that, but when it goes against you and it starts, like we saw midway through that third quarter when Port Adelaide started pressuring, harassing, winning their own ball, just getting distance and meterage on the contests, and it looked as if Sydney just couldn't wrestle back momentum. That's the biggest issue at the moment. If the game does go against Sydney, sometimes they aren't aware enough to wrestle it back, and that's the only knock I'd have on them as a side. Other than that, they are probably my premiership favourites at the moment. But if they fail to arrest that momentum, then it's just going to... Professional sides like North Melbourne, that's the only thing probably keeping North Melbourne from taking the next step. Geelong do it perfectly. They let teams into games in the second quarter and they just overrun them. They need to manage that.
No, definitely. But how much can you put down to Sydney and how much down to Port? Because as you said, Port were really pressuring them and everything like that. The next 3 weeks they've got Collingwood, Essendon and Hawthorn. So if they can
which ones are at home? Do you know?
Collingwood and Hawthorn. So
I'd give them 50-50 chance against Collingwood. I don't think they'd beat Hawthorn.
No, they wouldn't beat Hawthorn, but
Anyone's going to beat Hawthorn.
But you know, we didn't think they'd beat Sydney. So
yeah.
There you go.
So you never know in football.
Yeah,
I think
at least one.
I think, if they get within, I suppose, 4 goals, or even if they beat Collingwood, they've got that momentum against, beating Sydney and Collingwood at home and West Coast as well, that they can really challenge Hawthorn, really push Hawthorn. I think as much as Sydney were, disappointing, I suppose, in that last quarter, Port Adelaide were fantastic, especially Chad Wingard. I think he kicked 2 goals in that last quarter, and he's just
a gun.
He's an absolute gun, and I think GWS are kicking themselves at passing him up. And I think they took Hoskin Elliott and Bunteen over him, and slipped to Port Adelaide a pick 6, and he's turned up the best player from the draft so far.
I think we can say anything we like with the benefit of hindsight. Like at the time of the draft, Hoskin Elliott and Bunteen were standout choices and the top 5 in that draft was pretty much settled from day one. So we can say what we like, but Port got a bargain in Chad Wingard, and he looks like he's just going to be an absolute gun footballer for many years.
I mean, you add Wines and Wingard to that midfield, and I think yesterday it wasn't just those silky ball users and hard winners. I thought players like Broadbent were really...
He was fantastic.
He got 8 touches in the last quarter, and he was one of those players that threw himself on the ball whenever Sydney looked like rebounding and doing that famous... the quote, slingshot. I hate that now. I cannot stand it. But it is kind of slingshot football, but I hate the usage of it. Port Adelaide prevented that. They pressured, they tackled, they harassed, and
they got 9 goals, 6 from turnovers.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty much unheard of against a side like Sydney, who pride themselves on keeping the footy. And Sydney do what they do, and they kicked 7-3 from stoppages, which is very Sydney. So sorry to interrupt you there as well.
No, you're right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was looking for, the stat. I was just looking through my notes, I lost it.
You're welcome then.
You're welcome. You're saving this show from disaster.
No, well, that's a very loose definition, because I've probably pushed it towards the brink of disaster more than a few times. But, to have the majority, they Port kicked 1-6 from stoppages and 9-6 from turnovers, which, to do that against a side like Sydney, like I said, who pride themselves on keeping the footy and keeping it off everyone else and having, really large amounts of contested ball, that's a pretty bloody good effort, even in the conditions.
I think it should be noted that Port Adelaide will be incredibly sporadic with their form. I think they are capable of this, but they're only going to be capable of this maybe 3 or 4 times. They'll beat lower sides, but aside from that, they'll only 2-3 times they'll play like this against better sides for the rest of the season. I can't see at this stage them doing that week after week after week. They're
the third youngest side in the AFL. It's the two expansion sides. That are younger, and I think when you look at players like, I suppose Brad Ebert, he had a very good game, and you look at players like
touches.
You look at players like Broadbent and Hartlett and Wingard and even Andrew Moore, who I thought was okay, probably played his best game of the year. You look at players like that who are young, they're not going to be consistent, they're not going to have 20 disposals every single week. So, it's good to see what their top level is, but, it's just about sustaining a very good level of football for the rest of the year, I think.
Make sure you send us in your thoughts on 0427 767 767. We'll be back after a few messages.
This is Sin Radio.
Dear Naughty Rude, I love my boyfriend, but he has this weird thing when he's getting close. He bleats like a sheep. The problem is, I'm a vegetarian. Should I be worried?
Got a burning question?
Stalk us on Facebook.
Why don't you email us? What about texting us in?
Text us on the email and we'll call.
Sunday, 8 to 10 p.m.
The Naughty Rude Show.
Objection, 5 to 6 p.m. weekdays and 8 to 10 a.m. weekends.
Hi, I'm Shreyas, and I once tripped over a blind man's walking stick.
Objection on Sin.
Youth of Melbourne, are you over modern musical mediocrity? Well, now you can check out how it used to be with the Almost Midnight Space Disco, Sundays at 11 p.m. with Max Galaxio. Disco, boogie, funk, electro and other groovin' sounds from the 70s and 80s when they knew how to boogie on down. So tune in to Sin on Sunday night, the most jivin' station in town.
A side quest is an optional section of a video game and is commonly found in role-playing games.
It is a smaller mission within a larger storyline and can be used as a means to provide non-linear structures to an otherwise linear plot.
As a general rule, the completion of side quests are not essential for the game to be finished, but can bring various benefits to the player characters.
Also non-essential but highly awesome is Side Quest and Sin.
So tune in Fridays at 11 p.m. to hear Side Quest, Sin's home of indie and retro gaming.
And you're back listening to Bound for Glory on Sin, where Whit just goes through the Wimbledon draw and just finds the most ridiculous names as humanly possible.
There's two Croatian tennis players, Czechoslovakian, sorry, and they're both Pliskova. Karolina Pliskova and Kristina Pliskova.
Could be related.
You'd think it'd be awkward if they were seated or drawn to play together
Their
at some
parents
stage.
aren't very imaginative. We'll just, whatever. Karolina and Kristina. That's very Croatian. Don't worry about it.
Text if you're listening, girls. Text us in.
They're both K. They won't be able to tell each other apart. Anyway,
they're both massive fans of the show and football and this next game that we're about to discuss. Ethan, that next game, the one which there's no stats in the tennis. Sunday Age 4.
It's not in there.
So you have nothing to go off?
I have nothing to go off except that I watched it and I thought that Richmond were very good and I thought the Bulldogs weren't that bad, although that they were playing superior opposition.
It's been the story of the last few weeks for the Bulldogs season, I suppose. They've actually stepped up their game a lot. They're being a lot more competitive overall in games, and I think the knock on them was that they're a very good contested side, but it goes nowhere from there. And I think the addition of Ryan Griffin, who is probably the most informed player in the league at the moment, he's running wild, and I think you could probably put 22 players on him and he'd still get 30 touches a game. And
yes, the Joe Watson
the Joe Watson dilemma.
The Gary Ablett dilemma.
I think he's in that fallen to be considered amongst those two names.
Do we have any Richmond people on the panel?
No.
Thank God.
I know it's starting to come back, isn't it?
Because they're up and about. It's starting to get really bad. They're talking finals, they're talking top 4, they're talking home finals, and I'm thinking just get there first, because seriously.
Well, I looked at their season last night. I just had a quick glance at it, and they're 5-1 in away games. So they're actually starting to be competitive in as many games as they can, and I think that's a very important attribute. Because they are going to play finals, and I think if they're going to take it up to every team that they encounter in finals, they can push deep. I think they could shock a top 4 team and push into a prelim, but probably not win a grand final. Of course, I think winning it from outside the top 4 is impossible, but I think they stand a very good chance of pushing deep.
I think the good thing about Richmond yesterday was that it wasn't really anyone that particularly stood out or dominated. It was a really good team effort, which shows that they're not having a reliance on one particular person. Jack Riol kicked 3 goals, but it wasn't 6 goals, or they weren't really heavily relying on him or anyone in the team particularly. Did anyone else think that?
And I think it's been a story of the last few seasons, I suppose, of Richmond that it's been Cochin, Delidio, Martin, and then nothing. It falls away after that. I think I ridiculed their bottom six a bit last year. They looked a bit like St Kilda. They had the bottom six of players like, I suppose, Robert Eddy and I think Jason Blake. The players that probably weren't best 22 in premiership sides, and I think they're starting to arrest that problem. You get players like Sean Grigg, Reece Conker, who probably were in that 16 to 22 bracket. They're really stepping up and having an influence, and I think that's really important for their future premiership hopes.
Yeah, even in their top three yesterday, Vickery and Hooley. Now they're players that you wouldn't usually expect to be in your top three. You usually expect your Cochins and your Martins and those sorts of things. So it's really good to see that they're not having such a heavy reliance on those players to win games.
Just on Cochin, how much longer can we perpetuate the lie that he's an elite footballer? Because he's not at the moment.
It's not a lie.
He's not playing like one at the moment. No. I think he is, but he's not playing like one. Definitely not this season.
Well, he came second in the Brownlow last year at 22,
It's hard to say he's not an elite footballer. I think he's not playing like
an elite footballer.
Not at the moment. I think maybe... I'm not sure what that's down to, whether he's getting more attention.
Apparently, Joyce was saying that he's got a bit of a niggle with his knee.
Oh.
He missed a game there.
Jesus,
and he came back a bit underdone. So
they had the bye last week, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I think it was before the bye.
Well, yeah, you're right. He did miss a game.
He did. That was round 8 or so, I think.
Yeah, round 8, but he was playing sporadically, and his form was up and down before that. So I can't say that it was all his knee.
Is it the captaincy? Is it the added pressure of being a very young player leading a football club?
You know what? I'm sick of hearing this thing that captaincy puts more pressure on players. If you can't handle being a captain and a player,
God.
No, nothing on you, Whit.
Totally.
It's just a thing that's been in the media, and I'm sick of hearing it.
Yeah,
if you can't handle being a player and a captain, don't bother your player.
I think she's right. What does the captain do really? Toss the coin?
Yeah.
The leadership group.
Swallow last year dragged players across the line on his back, and he was captain, and that's why he did it, because he didn't do it because he was captain. He did it because he wanted to win.
Yeah, but the leadership group does that anyway. The captain tosses always to me. The captain is the one that tosses the coin. That's it.
He's not running drills or anything.
Exactly. That's the definition.
Job. So you don't think that Joe Watson played better last year as a result of being the captain? You don't think being a captain makes some players walk taller than others?
It makes you be a leader and an on-field leader and lead your team, but it doesn't impact on how you play.
Exactly. I'd say there's on-field leadership groups now where there's 4 or 5 or 6 senior players in it now, and obviously with senior players, and people say it doesn't make you a better player. You're more likely to be in your prime if you're a senior player, because you're in that age group where you're playing your best football.
I remember when I was playing juniors, they made me captain for 1 week, and I tore it up, and then they took the captaincy off me the next week because we had a rotation system, and I played like crap the next week. So I reckon it makes people play better. I think some people not all captains, I'll give you that, but I think that some people thrive on the added leadership and things like that.
I would love this to be studied. I really think that, whether the captaincy gives people more ego. There's a case study in this for science. For science.
I think in addition to what you said about captaincy earlier, Ben, I think captains are the first player that teammates look to stand up, and I think what Cochin's doing isn't at the standard that he hit last year. Whether that's due to injury or captaincy or not, I don't know. But, if it is injury, I think really, as they are going to be a finals team, I think they need to give him a week off at some point.
I think they'll lock away finals, and then they'll go, all right, Cochin, go to Sweden and get your knee fixed and come back for the finals.
Because if they're going to have a Cochin that's... if they're going to have a Cochin that's running at 90% in finals, and... I think if they rest him, for a game against, I don't know, if they play GWS or Melbourne or the Dogs at some point, well, they played the Dogs last night, of course, I don't know if they play them again, but I think, if they have a game like that, that they can lock away as a comfortable win, that they really have to, take care of Cochin. If he has still got that knee injury, then, just give him a week off, and because a Cochin at 100% in finals can really turn a game on its head, and I think he's capable of that, because I think he is one of the best footballers in the league, and I think, it's going to be very important for Richmond that he's fully fit.
Is there anything such as a Richmond guaranteed win, though? Because last year we were singing their praises, and then they dropped it. They dropped it to Gold Coast, Freo in Melbourne before they became the Freo they are today, and
Dropping a game to the Gold Coast is not that bad anymore. I mean,
yeah, not anymore. They did it before it was cool, though.
They have that game coming up as well.
Losses.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, Peter. I think Richmond are at the stage now in their development or in their list age bracket where you can say there are games that you should be able to comfortably, on your own ability and on a certain amount of effort, win. Obviously, not flog them, but they should be able to beat GWS by 10 goals by just showing up. They should be. Really, people say, teams don't show up. If you put the basic amount of effort in, you should be a better side than the other team.
They tried it last year and they won by 20 points, I think.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, but they've improved on last year. I think there's more to them this year. I think we'll move on to also just quickly before we move on, I just want to say Lockie Hunter was fantastic for the Bulldogs in his debut game.
Yes.
That's a steal at pick 50.
Proud Western Suburbs boy, and I know for a fact that a lot of his family and friends were there last night supporting him, so well done, Lockie.
Well done, Lockie. He was pretty good. I don't have the stats in front of me, but he had something like nearly 20 touches, and he took a few marks inside 50, and he all presented himself, and it was played really well. Moving on to the next game.
Sorry, before that he had 19 touches.
19?
Yeah.
It's not bad for a first game.
Not bad for a first game.
I think... Now, I heard the Fox football commentary team say this at three-quarter time. Now, Eddie, I know you listen to the show. A lot of people listen to this show, if you haven't heard. A 6-7 goal loss against St Kilda, a side that spent most of the day going backwards and most of the game switching the ball around, playing uncontested, playing keepings off. That's not an improvement. I'm sorry, that's not an improvement. What Melbourne showed yesterday was not an improvement.
But really, what have they changed in the past week from what they changed, apart from the coach? Is the coach really going to really impact on a game that much? Is Mark Neeld was Mark Neeld responsible for every single performance that a player put in this season?
Well, I think as the coach, you have to take some sort of responsibility. But I think, what we saw from Craig last night is that, his game style from Adelaide a little bit, obviously the players and personnel aren't there to carry it out in any way, shape or form, but, I think they use the corridor a bit more. Mark Neeld, being under Mick Moldhouse's tutelage for a few years, often like to use the boundary, run along there, and if there's a 50-50 ball to throw in, and I think Melbourne tried to use the corridor a little bit more, and of course they ran into a brick wall, they ran into a St Kilda zone, and all of a sudden they were clueless, running around handballing in circles, not going anywhere, and
the story of Melbourne.
Which is the story of Melbourne's past 7 years.
And I, from what I could hear listening on the radio, was the fact that there was pretty much summarising Melbourne's season was the performance early of Cam Pedersen. Is that right?
There were some contests and he made some errors where he just... It's all right because he's that player who can fill in as not a tall but a medium-sized player that can hit a contest and impact it if a tall player's going for the ball. He completely, I forget which, it was a St Kilda small player. It was either Trent Dennis-Lane or it was Assad or something like that. And there was a high ball coming in, and he's ran at it. He's completely missed it, and they've taken the mark where it's spilled, and the St Kilda players have just ran and kicked a goal. And
it was an easy mark. Yeah,
it was like it's basic stuff that is Melbourne's problem. People can now. Well, Mark Neeld had 3 issues that got him sacked in my mind: poor list management, poor game day tactics, and poor, even questionable and highly partial towards the end, the sort of team selection. But I think it's basic stuff Melbourne can't nail at the moment. And watching them yesterday, I keep waiting for when they make an incremental improvement where, like, I think the Carlton game where they got blown off the park on the scoreboard, but they showed pressure, and even the Richmond game, they pressured Richmond. But even if sides can just show up and half-arse it and just wait for Melbourne to make the mistakes that they're going to make, then what are you doing out there? Like... I'm at that point where I just keep waiting for something, and maybe there's a bit more. It's not. They're garbage. They are garbage.
They just need to get kick footy long towards the proper goals, or their goals.
Or some sort of structure or some basic anything.
Don't even worry about structure. Just get kick footy. That just...
Junior stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Kick it to Watts.
Coach them like they are under nines. Get footy, kick footy towards our goals, and things work.
But they can't kick footy because they keep turning it over.
It doesn't matter. Just get footy.
But that's
kick
one of the
footy
problems.
Towards our goals.
Kick footy to target.
This is a vicious circle,
They're wearing our jumpers. Kick it to them. I suppose. I think yesterday they even looked like the jumpers are similar. But
and on the issue, I think. And this is one of Melbourne's things. You got players like Jack Watts who tried hard yesterday. He did have an okay game. He did make some mistakes, but the thing was, is that effort going to be there next week? And this is for 15 players on that list that are probably playing for their careers at the moment. Are they going to do that next week? Are they going to do that week after, or they think, okay, one performance, I'm going to be okay. Heat's going to be off for 3 weeks. You can't have that mentality if you're a professional footballer.
15's a bit generous, I would have thought, Ben.
15. Okay, well, 20.
I would go 25.
How many can you delist in 1 year? How much can you delist in 1 year?
You can't delist that many, but there are.
Can you? Everyone apart from probably couldn't just give them all rookie contracts. No,
Now, we saw the AFL call Port Adelaide a basket case last season, and we're hearing whispers that they're going to intervene with Melbourne. Do you think that they are that desperate that they need help from the AFL?
I think they're that bad at the moment.
I think the AFL...
Yeah, I keep going back and forth between it's Melbourne's fault, but if we don't fix this, they're going to cark it. Melbourne's fault. If we don't fix this, they're going to cark it. After yesterday, they're just garbage. I don't know who's going to fix them, to be honest.
It kind of was, in a way, partly due to the AFL with the franchise teams coming in and stealing the draft picks.
It was an unfortunate time.
It doesn't matter that you can give them as many draft picks as you want. This is why everyone is so against giving them a priority pick. You can give them as many draft picks as you want. You can give them Jimmy Tumpus. You can give them Tom Scully. You can give them Jack Tringo. The list managers and the development coaches are going to ruin their careers anyway.
So you think that they should be not giving them picks but better coaching staff?
I don't know.
Yeah, development stuff.
Help them pay Paul Roos. Get Stephen Wells from Geelong for them.
It's a bit
Get John Lamont from North Melbourne. I don't know that's the only development coach I know in the AFL. Get someone who can actually make the players they draft play like they did in the under-18s in the AFL.
And they haven't been robbed by expansion sides at all. They were crap in 2007 to 2010 before expansion sides were around.
But I guess they haven't been given that opportunity to go forward because of the expansion sides. They haven't been...
Not at all. They had the picks.
They had the picks.
They didn't utilise them. You look at the record, you see Cal Morton, you see Tom Scully, who, that led to Jesse Hogan, of course, but, you see players like those, Jack Watts, who really should be a lot better player than what he currently is. He was okay yesterday, but, his career today has been nothing like what's been expected.
But even Jimmy Tumpus has gone backwards since he drafted him.
Oh, he had a good game.
But he's, he's
first.
He's a first-year player, I know that, but at the same time, just... It sickens me to think that there's players out there who are going, please not Melbourne on draft night, because that's a very real possibility that's happening.
And I think it says a lot about Melbourne as well that players like Dean Turlick and Mitch Clisby can walk into the side. They had 52 disposals combined last night.
Oh, give them 6 months and they'll be shells of their former selves.
And I think that says a lot about where Melbourne's youth are at. I think. While we're on Melbourne, I think Colin Garland was brilliant yesterday. He had 12 intercept possessions, 29 overall for a tall defender. I think got to note his performance, and I think St Kilda. Jack Stephen was on fire in the first quarter. He was unstoppable, and Lee Montagna was he was very good. Terry Malera, I thought probably played his best game. He had 23 disposals. Running around a half forward flank, and
no one's called Terry anymore. Have we noticed that? No one's called Terry anymore. There was Terrys in the 80s, and now no one's called Terry except for Terry Malera. That's it. Who names their kid Terry nowadays? Nobody. You guys going to name your kids Terry?
Probably not.
There you go.
Haven't had to think about it, to be quite honest.
No one is named Terry anymore. You have to think about this. Just like no women are ever named Sharon. Sorry, Ethan, I just cut in on you. Go.
No, I was done. Good point.
So what's the deal with airline food? It's a very Seinfeld.
It is.
He just did.
You ever notice how nobody's called Terry anymore?
You notice how men always leave the toilet seat up.
Fantastic. We've entered fast mode before the 40-minute mark.
It's whenever I come on the show. It just
it's not.
At some stage it just seems to descend into fast.
We always find a way.
We'll be back after some messages because we need to put a stop to this.
Can I just give some sizzle to the next segment?
Oh, God.
We've got some... No, we need to give this some sizzle. In fact, get on Twitter and plug this. I'm saying this on air.
Hashtag this, Ben Gazupi, King of Sizzle.
Yes.
And Damon has a text message over there. Damon?
Yes, we do. Just a short one.
Can we say that on that time?
No, not that one.
Oh, the other one.
Don't worry
not
about
the
that
explicit one.
It's not 9:30 p.m. We've only got one. It says, hard to believe they made the final in 2000, which, it's kind of hard to believe.
Who actually Googled the Pliskova twins? Can you add a name to that text message? Because I want to give you a follow on Twitter and a big hug and things.
I think we'll be back after some sim messages.
Tune in to We Need to Talk About Film on SYN to hear interviews from film buffs and reviewers from all around Australia. And of course, here's some funky tunes from your favourite films to get you through your Saturday night. Tune in to We Need to Talk About Film with me, Georgia, from 6 p.m. on Saturdays here on SYN.
SYN's international feature album of the week, Thundercat, Apocalypse.
LA badass bassist Thundercat releases his sophomore album. Produced by Flying Lotus, Apocalypse is a fusion of funk, soul and melodic grooves.
Listen to the international feature album Thundercat, Apocalypse all this week on SYN.
Y'all ready for this?
Everyone knows SYN Talks music, but who knew SYN Talks sport? SYN is full of exciting and fresh sports content, including the Sports Desk, a daily half-hourly sports chat show. You can hear the latest sports news and reviews every day from 9 a.m, only on SYN.
SYN Radio 90.7.
You're listening to Bound for Glory on SYN. Now we've got a relatively new segment, the Rumour File. So, Ben, you going to kick us off?
Yeah.
Sizzle.
Great for the sizzle.
King of sizzle.
Bit of traction. Bit of cut.
Hashtag sizzle on Twitter, get on it.
I think
Rumour File like a traction engine.
Yeah. I think we should start off. Basically, the Rumour File is I'm not going to say we're well connected, but we know people who know things.
Know people,
yeah.
Ben Kazupi and his
sources. We sound like the mafia.
Yeah, we know people.
We're not the mafia. Not the concrete boots. Yeah, but we've been digging for the last month, looking for things. We've been looking for tidbits of info. We have people who kindly tell us things. We know they shouldn't, but they do anyway. And
we tell them to you people.
Yeah, and we tell them to you people if you're listening. Like what was the name of the sisters?
Katerina and Christina Pliskova.
Massive fans of the show.
I'm not going to read that text message out on air, but I will agree wholeheartedly with the content in it. And yes, I would not turn it down.
Ask us on Twitter later what the text message was. It was very explicit for this time slot. Finally, okay, let's move on. Basically, first of all, as we know, Melbourne are in a bit of a coaching situation.
Are they?
So I hadn't noticed.
Just in case you've been living under a rock.
Ben Kazupi, breaking news.
Breaking news. Very Damien Barrett-ish, isn't it?
Or Cedric Sully.
Essentially, there are only 5 candidates that everyone should be keeping an eye on and looking out for. That's it. There's only 5 people for this job. There are places that are suggesting that there's more and that there's assistant coaches who can put their hand. No, there's only really 5 people. They are in order of what we've been trying to gauge from opinion. Rodney Eade would probably be the favourite at this stage. There were people inside the Melbourne Football Club, internal dissenters of Mark Neild, who have already warmed to the idea of his potential candidacy. His management has been spoken to. Eade has reciprocated that he likes the idea. He went on AFL 360 on Monday night, I believed, and said, yes, I would be all for this idea. Second would be Paul Roos. Paul Roos is going to be given a massive offer.
Probably to get him off Fox Footy more than
I think everyone... It's going to be like
chip in. It'll be like a fundraiser.
I think someone said... I think it was Andrew Dimitri said that the AFL as a landscape is poorer for not having Paul Roos as a senior coach. But at the same token, the AFL media landscape will be better for not having Paul Roos as a media person.
You know what I love about that? Andrew Dimitri said his game style was boring in 2005 or 2006 or whatever it was. That's a fantastic contradiction, Andy. Oh, thank you.
Love him. Love you, Andy. The big horse.
You can come on the show. Another big fan.
Get around him.
One D's Karate member that I spoke to said that there was a very strong likelihood that this large offer was going to get made. I was told this on Monday in last night's Herald Sun, I believe, posted on the Herald Sun site, there was an article that said that would happen. So there goes my exclusive. Thanks, Herald Sun. But anyway, third on the list, Mark Williams. Now, another...
Does he leave Richmond, though? That's the thing I can't see. You know, Richmond are a very strong side that, you know, they're on the way up, and I think Williams would be silly to leave.
I think funny you mentioned this. Williams' name has been brought up by an influential, a similar group that are willing to make a sizable donation to whatever contract Melbourne throw at Williams. And I do not believe that management have spoken at the moment. Melbourne management, his management, but allegedly Peter Jackson, the current CEO of Melbourne, responded to the offer and said, you know, we believe as the club that Williams would be still on the fence about leaving Richmond, and we're not sure that we're going to offer him something just at the moment because we don't know where his intentions lie. Fourth and fifth, now these are two outsiders that their managements have been sought out during the week. Brent Ratton and Mark Harvey. They are the two outsiders, both just an informal chat from management at the moment. Neither have said anything publicly, neither have obviously put up their hand for intention to coach. Who knows what will happen with Mark Harvey, because the Brisbane situation could deteriorate and he may be forced to step in.
I think you'd be looking at that first to see if, you know, Michael Voss stays on as coach. I think, you know, if he doesn't, I think, you know, Harvey would probably just walk into that role.
And I think on Melbourne-related stuff, the league are leaning towards giving them an extra draft pick.
Yay.
The pick will be between, allegedly, 13 to 15, mid-first round. 13, 15, 14, something like that. That's the number that's being thrown around. They're leaning towards
first round.
Yeah, the assistants meetings will continue to July.